All right. Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar about weight loss. So I'm so excited to have my friend Lindsey with me today. So Dr. Lindsey Elmore is a fabulous pharmacist doing lots of great education out on social media about not only weight loss, but just all kinds of things that are wrong with our healthcare system, but also talking about nutrients and functional medicine, integrative medicine, all the things to take care of our bodies. So we met, I think we alluded to in our emails, we met a really long time ago at a traditional pharmacy conference that we were both part of a planning committee to put educational content together for, and bonded over kombucha because Lindsey went to Whole Foods and got her some kombucha while she was there. And I was like, where did you get that? So I thought she found this in the convention center, and I was gonna be like, oh man, I need to go go get that. But anyways, so it's been a long time that we've been able to connect and just journey together. It's been fun watching your journey through, learning more about functional integrative medicine as well. So thank you guys all for taking time this afternoon to listen to our webinar here. And I know a lot of people will probably catch it on demand as well later. So a little bit about myself. So my name's Melody. I am the owner of Farm to Table, and we are an online clinical practice for pharmacists in functional medicine. So basically, we take care of patients and help them to really, our goal is to help you thrive. Our goal is to help you decrease your medication burden, hopefully get off medications if you can, and address your nutrient depletions. A lot of the things we're going to talk about today, stress, gut health, thyroid, all of those things. So we have pharmacists all over the country that are trained in this and ready to help patients. And so I also do teaching myself on that platform, as well as our functional medicine continuing education platform. So you can find me online at farmtotable.life is my Instagram handle. So Lindsey, why don't you just tell us a little bit about you for anybody that's maybe new to learning about you?
Yeah, so I am Dr. Lindsey Elmore. I am a chemist and a pharmacist, and I took about 8-9 years ago, I took a really hard left turn into natural wellness, functional medicine. And it's been really fun to work with Melody over the course of years, as our trajectories of our career have been in a lot of ways very similar. We were both academicians, we're both ambulatory care, chronic disease pharmacists, and we both realize that there is a better way to help people to heal. And so we both really took a different spin, a different approach to how we like to practice pharmacy. And the thing that I hope you take away from me on this call is that I come down right in the middle of the traditional Western medicine practice, allopathic medicine, and then all things natural. I don't think that one is superior or inferior to the other. They are simply two different ways of thinking. And so whether it's holistic or integrative or traditional Chinese medicine or allopathic, I like to study them all and see how they all fit and work together. I am a board certified pharmacist. I also have just recently started the Diplomat in Pharmacy Law program. I am also very interested in how the United States is fundamentally different than other westernized nations in the oversight and regulation of medications. And I think that that has never been brought to the forefront more than it was last week when the FDA started allowing the importation of foreign drugs from Canada into the United States. And so I am very, very much in the how do we wrangle drug pricing and make it more available to help our patients. And so that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely fall in similar mindset too. Like I hate that everything is so you have to be in one box or the other box, right? Like you have to be, I'm okay with this or I'm not okay with this. Like there's no one willing to whether we're talking about a vaccine or a probiotic or, whatever it is, no one's okay with talking about, okay, well, maybe it is harmful, but maybe it has some benefit, or, like there's no, it's like, oh, you're in this group or you're that group. I mean, so much of our world is like that, even with our politics and everything. You're either right or you're left. You can't be in the middle. And so I think it's so nice to have voices online that are able to like speak to like that alt middle, I think, as Dr. Z would say, if you follow him. So anyways, but we will get on with our topic for today. But so the reason why we're here is because there are so many people at the beginning of the year that are like, okay, I'm ready to get back in shape. I'm ready to get weight off, pounds off. And sometimes it's not even about the pounds necessarily, as it is about turning that fat tissue into muscle to help improve your insulin resistance. So we're not necessarily here saying you need to be a certain weight, a certain BMI. There's limitations to the BMI calculation when we're talking muscle mass versus fat mass. So we're not necessarily as focused on the pounds and on, those types of numbers that we're looking on the scale. And we don't want people to focus so much on numbers. We really want to focus on the health and why you saw the number creep up and why, you're fatigued, or why, there's all these other things that are happening because of weight gain. And so we really want to help people understand some of those root causes of weight gain and why people are struggling with weight loss. And so often, you go to your doctor and the doctor says, okay, just eat less, exercise more, that's the advice you get because you have 15 minutes, right, with your medical provider, and maybe even sometimes less than 15 minutes. So in reality, this doesn't work. We have this obesity epidemic. You go into any public place in America and you just see lots of, issues going on in our country and the food supply and all of that kind of stuff. So today we are going to focus on, we're going to talk about what most weight loss programs get wrong. And some of that is that it focuses on quick fixes. It also focuses on this one size fits all approach, and also really relies on the fact that your willpower is the only way to make things happen. And so, there's also a lot of times unrealistic expectations. People are like, oh, I need to shed this much weight to get into this dress for this event this summer or that. And there's it's very like, I'm going to do these extreme dieting programs to try to lose the weight. And so we really want to, focus on not having those extremes, and also, not having these overly restrictive food plans, because in reality, most of those are not sustainable for a long period of time. And so we want to make sure whatever we decide to do to change our diet, to change our lifestyle, and really it's not a diet, it's not this short-term thing, it's really fixing the lifestyle component. And whatever we do with that is sustainable for the long term. And a lot of programs, whatever programs you're looking at out there, skip really addressing some of these underlying causes that we're going to talk about today. So we definitely want to make sure that we're covering those. And so what are some of those underlying causes? We have some here on the screen, but gut dysbiosis. So this is where, Lindsey, do you want to tell everyone what gut dysbiosis is? Whoops. Oh, she's having your sound is not on.
My bad, y'all. Sorry about that.
There you go.
Gut dysbiosis is one of the 8 root causes of disease in functional medicine. So if we think about all of the root causes of disease, we remember the acronym STAINS, and infections, infestations, and dysbiosis are the I. And so gut dysbiosis is when there is an imbalance in the microorganisms in the intestines. This can be simply in the intestines, or it can also be in the gastrointestinal system. So these gut microorganisms, gut flora, are primarily bacteria, but there are also fungi and protozoa and viruses that also are in the gut microbiome. There's also archaea, which are this like really ancient form of bacteria. There are multiple types of gut dysbiosis. Some people have too much of the harmful bacteria, whereas other people don't have enough of the good bacteria. And the problem with having this imbalance between the good bacteria and the bad bacteria is that it can cause all kinds of systemic problems that are not only, irritable bowel and inflammatory bowel disease. It's not only gut stuff, but it is also skin, like atopic eczema and dermatitis. It also can lead to autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis has been linked to dysbiosis, and also metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and obesity are also stem from having an imbalance in the gut bacteria.
Yeah. Yeah. And that inflammation from those excess bacteria, basically like each of these, a lot of the gram-negative bacteria that are overgrown have this like LPS or lipopolysaccharide, and it sort of pokes holes in our intestine and creates this inflammatory process that then your body is like getting these food particles that are normal foods. Like sometimes we run food sensitivity tests and people are reacting to like lettuce or like green beans or like random things, right? Not bad things. And it's because their body is just, oh my goodness, what is this? It's foreign. It's on this like heightened immune response. And it sort of leads down that path of, creating this autoimmunity really. And so not only does it cause increased risk of type 2 diabetes, it also we're seeing so much increased risk of other autoimmune conditions, including type 1 diabetes. I've never seen, obviously I've been practicing, for a while now, since 2009, taking care of people with diabetes. And just over the last 5 years, the numbers of adults that I'm seeing newly diagnosed with type 1 is just astounding. So there's just a lot of things with the gut dysbiosis. We could probably have presentations for days, weeks, conferences, like talking about, addressing this, but it is a big thing that so many people with metabolic syndrome or with, trouble with weight loss, PCOS, some of these insulin resistant conditions come into the office and they're struggling to lose weight, but ultimately, we can give them supplements and we can give them, exercise regimens and all these things. But if we don't address that gut dysbiosis, then we're not going to really help them lose the weight as effectively, because they're still going to have this inflammation brewing and this overactive immune response.
Well, and another thing I'll bring up, you saying that people are coming in testing sensitive to like really basic foods. In Chinese medicine, it is a symptom when you are unable to digest certain foods. Now, I am not at all claiming that true food allergies to shellfish, fish, soy, peanuts, tree nuts, all of that exists. But I am saying in general, we are getting less effective as human beings at digesting our foods because foods are highly processed, because we have this dysbiosis at baseline, we have this ongoing inflammation. And when we have these conditions, it's not just about correcting the microbiome. It's also about how do we repair the lining of the gut, replace our vitamins and minerals that have been lost through the leaky gut. All of that is very, very important as well for us to say it's not just about the bacteria. It's also about how do we squash all of the inflammation that is leading to all of these problems.
Right. Exactly. And some of these other things we've got here on the screen, the insulin resistance comes from the gut. It also comes from, those nutrient depletions that you mentioned. So even simple things like zinc, like I still like every time I hear a presentation about like diabetes, I'm like, how come no one is talking about that there's data that we have pre-diabetic patients that get zinc, less of them convert to diabetes than the people that don't. It decreases CRP, which is that inflammation marker, also decreases our insulin resistance markers as well. So, even just assessing someone's zinc status, which is so easy to do. We can measure that at a traditional lab. We can measure it in RBC zinc at a regular lab, as well as the plasma and serum zinc. So much of like all this infectious stuff, in our immune system requires zinc. So it's like we're using it up for that process. And then we're, having to, it's lacking in some of the other cellular processes in our body. And it's involved in so much in our body. So simple nutrient depletions can play a big role in some of these insulin resistance things as well. Let's talk a little bit about hormones. We obviously, know that cortisol has a big effect on weight loss. So you want to go through a little bit about the role cortisol plays in sort of causing us to gain weight in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll take one big step back and add on to something you just said.
Yeah.
Another thing, we're not assessing nutrient depletions, but we're also not assessing fasting insulin levels. So many of you on the call today may be concerned about perhaps an elevated A1C or an elevated blood sugar. But the thing is, your insulin is going to be elevated far in advance of an A1C elevation or a blood sugar elevation. And so I also encourage you, if you are someone who's maybe pre-diabetic, a few pounds overweight, and you're starting to work on weight loss, I encourage you to continue to assess fasting insulin, because you may see your A1C coming down, but we also want to see that fasting insulin coming down, because if the fasting insulin's not coming down, the A1C is inevitably going to go back up. And so we need to take that into account. So another thing about, okay, so let's talk about hormones, right? So I think most people, when they think hormones, they think testosterone, progesterone, estrogen. Okay. But if you have testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, if you have a problem there, chances are you likely have a thyroid problem up under that. And up under that is where we get to the root hormonal cause of not just weight gain, obesity, type 2 diabetes, but also chronic stress, chronic anxiety, chronic dysbiosis. And that is where we start to have our cortisol and insulin problems. So cortisol, steroid hormone, can't live without it. You will literally die without cortisol. However, when you have too much of it and when you are chronically exposed to it, it causes all kinds of problems. So cortisol is really important in mitigating, triggering our body stress response. It increases blood sugar, it reduces inflammation, it suppresses the immune system, and it aids in metabolism. And so cortisol is related to our circadian rhythms. We want high cortisol levels in the morning because it helps us to get out of bed and get going. And then we want the cortisol levels to fall throughout the day. So if you are facing a situation of weight gain and an inability to lose weight, another lab that you can ask for is a 4-point cortisol. Because if you just get a random cortisol level throughout the day, we're unable to see if we're getting that healthy spike of cortisol in the morning and this reduction of cortisol throughout the day. So when cortisol levels are high, it triggers an increase in our heart rate, an increase in our energy level. It helps us to get into that fight or flight mode, and we need that. However, when we have too much cortisol over the course of time, it causes things like weight gain, high blood pressure, fatigue, mood changes, irritability. It also can cause worsening of menopausal symptoms, thinning skin, and ultimately it also feeds our insulin resistance. It also disrupts the way that thyroid hormone balance works. It prevents the conversion of T4 into the most active form of thyroid hormone, which is T3, and it drives it towards like an imposter of thyroid hormone called reverse T3. So we are getting less of our healthy thyroid action as well. We also know that high cortisol levels can cause weight gain. Low levels can also cause weight loss. Now, we don't want that. We don't want cortisol levels to go to zero. We also don't want to go so far out of balance. Like the two extreme opposites of cortisol are Cushing's disease and Addison's disease. And so Cushing's is where you just have so much cortisol. And this is where we start to see these weight gain patterns, as well as the buffalo humps, as well as new onset diabetes. At the opposite extreme. Yes, exactly. Addison's disease, when we don't have enough cortisol, fatigue, low blood sugar can cause problems with appetite and weight loss. So we do want to be right in the middle. So if you are struggling with your cortisol levels, one of the things that we need to do is in the 5R protocol, which is the way that you approach leaky gut and gut problems, including weight gain. The fifth piece of the equation in the 5R protocol is to rebalance your attitude, and rebalancing in a way that helps you to reduce stress. So whatever it takes to reduce stress and get out of this chronic fight or flight, meditation, yoga, mindful eating, sleeping more, going to therapy, getting gentle exercises, whatever it is important that we have some sort of stress reduction program as a part of our weight loss routine. So that's a very basic about how cortisol can throw things out of balance. Cortisol, it just leads to this chronic stress. It leads to chronic inflammatory problems. It leads to chronic thyroid problems. And all of that can lead to, it leads to weight gain, et cetera. It can lead to all kinds of problems.
Yeah, it's sort of like a vicious cycle. I think I have a picture further down in the slides I was looking for. I thought it was closer to this. So I was like moving the slides a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's all sort of a cycle, because the more cortisol you have, the more fat you gain, the more insulin resistance you have, and you just like continue to perpetuate, that. And so when we're thinking about like, how do we actually lose weight to, and address all these things, this is really where functional medicine has a really unique approach to weight loss. Because oftentimes people are like, okay, I need to lose weight and I just need to, the calories in, calories out, you commented that this is a lie. It's absolutely a lie, because if I get 100 calories of avocado, which is like probably like a tablespoon or something, like versus 100-calorie pack of like an Oreo cardboard type thing, like that sends completely different signals to our body. And so, so that's just been what we've taught over and over, is this calorie counting. Obviously there's data for calorie restriction. I'm not saying there's not, but a lot of times once people like add back in the food, like you can't restrict the calories forever, and you keep restricting calories, your basal metabolic rate continues to decrease. And so it just doesn't work in the long term. So we need to have an approach to weight loss that is including nutrition. So we have to look at nutrition. We have to be able to feed the microbiome. I find so many patients come to us in functional medicine, they've started removing all these foods and they're eating like nothing, right? They're eating chicken, rice, like maybe 2 vegetables, because that's what feels good for them at the time. And, so we also know that we have to address that. We have to address stress management. We have to look at hormones, like we were talking about, nutrient depletions, and then also cravings. I mean, we have to realize how to handle those in a proper way from, I think, we've all had a lot of different psychological experiences in our life. Some people have had trauma experiences that caused, differences in eating patterns. We know a lot of adverse childhood events lead to chronic disease. And so sometimes reframing our thoughts around food in general is one of the most important places to start. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities we have coming up to do that. But really, when we talk about nutrition, we want to have portion control. We can't eat everything and expect to lose weight, right? We can't go to, a Christmas party, Thanksgiving style party every weekend and continue to eat all these things. Now, should we never eat those things? No, because we're living here, we're enjoying life. We want to enjoy food. So we don't want people to feel like they can never do that, because we have to like shift that mindset to like, this is okay once in a while, but like once you get off the train, let's not like be off the train for the next 2 months, and before we decide to hop back onto your plan. But so mindful choices, so much data surrounding the Mediterranean diet as a really solid core foundation. In functional medicine, we often call this like a cardiometabolic diet as well, but lots of anti-inflammatory nutrients, limited red meat, fish. We have omega-3s from our olive oil and antioxidants. So that's something to think about is, how can what we put in our body turn on the right signaling. So we want to put things that are antioxidants, anti-inflammatory, so that we help our body, whether it's, a handful of blueberries instead of something else, instead of something else that you were going to choose. But really, we talked already a little bit, but sustainable changes, making sure we're making things like changing things that are actually going to work. Because if we try to do something crazy, like for me, if I try to go keto, I would fail like within like 2 days, right? Like that's just not going to work for my lifestyle and taking care of kids. And, obvious. And I don't even really love it for most women that are, premenopausal, because we need it for a lot of you need carbs for insulin, hormones, and all those things. But that's a whole other conversation. But like, you have to find something that works for you, and has flexibility, because again, we're here to be in community with one another. We're here to enjoy each other. We're not taking these physical things with us. It's about the relationships. So I think, food is a part, and we have, our business is called Farm to Table. Our podcast is called Table Talk, but we really like want to be at the table with people. That's like what we want to visualize, when we do a lot of our education. And so we know how important it is sitting around the table with your friends and family. And that time really needs to be, enjoyable and not stressful.
Another
Do you have
thing,
something to say about that, Lindsey?
Yeah, another thing I'll add about mindful eating. I love the work of Janine Roth on this front. She is an author, and she wrote a book called Women, Food, and God. And she maintains that our relationship to ourselves is right there on the plate in front of us. It's right there. And so the more that we love ourselves, care about ourselves, the more likely we are to make good food choices. Dr. Will Cole says it very plainly: you can't heal a body that you hate. You can't heal a body that you hate. And so the first step is finding out that inherent self-worth. The other piece of the equation that Janine teaches about healthy eating is many of us, especially in the United States, have lost track of whether or not we are actually hungry. We don't even recognize hunger or a lack thereof. And so the first rule of mindful eating that Janine teaches is eat when you're hungry. The second thing is to eat sitting down in a calm environment. This does not include the car, right? And so if we...
Or in front of your computer.
Yes, or in front of your computer.
Which I'm guilty of.
Oh, I'm so guilty of it. And that brings up the next one, which is eat without distractions. Eat without distractions. Another thing that we have to get in through our head if we truly want to lose weight and maintain a healthy body weight across a lifespan is that we need to eat what we truly want, right? If we take foods and say, I absolutely cannot eat that for the rest of my life, we're giving that food the power. And all of a sudden, whatever it is, the pizza, the chocolate cake, the hamburgers, the French fries, it's like calling your name, right? So I totally agree with Melody that we can't get into a mindset where certain foods are completely off the table forever. Because if you allow yourself to truly sit down and go, okay, I'm hungry. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hungry am I? Okay, I'm about a 7. Probably time to start thinking about what I want to eat. If you say the thing I want to eat right now is a bag of M&Ms, go eat the bag of M&Ms, because I promise you, when you come back later on that day and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how hungry am I? Okay, I'm about a 6. Probably time to start thinking about what I want to eat. All of a sudden, you're not going to want M&Ms or chocolate cake or pizza or hamburgers or whatever it is. You are going to be able to make better food choices because you are allowing yourself that moderation and that flexibility. So eat what you want. Eat until you're satisfied. In Japan, there is some just, teaching that when you are about 70% full, probably time to stop eating, right? So eat until you're satisfied. Don't eat until you are in pain. Remember, it takes time for those stretch receptors and those density receptors to get the leptin and the ghrelin, the hunger signals in our bodies balanced back out. So eat until you're satisfied, but don't push yourself. And you guys, and please don't feel like you have to clean your plate. That is such old, antiquated advice, and we just don't have to do it. There are 2 more, and the next one I think is very important, eat with the intention of being in full view of others. One of the things that is so detrimental is that when we hide our eating habits, and when we get into the situation where back of your closet, that's where all the candy is, and it's, you're hiding your habit. So eat at least with the intention of being in full view of others. I understand I live alone. I'm not always in front of people, but I can at least sit at the dinner table, And then lastly is eat with pleasure and with gusto and with enthusiasm, right? Food is meant to be enjoyed. And you can, even if you are eating for sustenance, you still can enjoy the overall experience of it. And the other thing that I will bring up, the Amare products, one of them that came to mind as you were talking was GBX Fit. GBX Fit is a great option because, Amare is the mental wellness company. So if we're going to do weight loss, we have to do it in a way that also is good for mental wellness, right? We have to do it in a way that is good for mental wellness. So GBX Fit is a great way to get weight loss in a way that works on multiple levels. That's not about starvation. It's about first reducing bloating and inflammation. Then there is a prebiotic in there that helps to feed beneficial bacteria, reduce cravings, and it helps with our healthy gut barrier. We also have a phytobiotic phytonutrient in there that helps with our stress response, which is going to help with all of the cortisol levels. And only then does it start helping to reduce fat. So we are working on bloating, on dopamine, on inflammation, on food cravings, on stress response before we start getting into, okay, I must lose weight now. And so that comes to mind. Melody dropped her link in to save $10. If you have questions, come to us. You also can shop the code Happy Mix if you decide to start with Happy Juice, which also helps with cortisol, dopamine, serotonin responses. If you get Happy Juice, you can bundle it with the GBX Fit, save $10, and get a free frother when you check out with the code Happy Mix.
Awesome. And I think we covered the microbiome pretty well. So I'm going to skip over this slide. Lindsey was alluding to some of the hormones, the ghrelin and the leptin. So this just a little bit overviews the obesity gut microbiome connection. So when you have this imbalanced microbiome, you do get decreased leptin production, you get leptin resistance, and you also can have increased inflammation. Body stores more fat, like we were talking about, and ultimately, that insulin causes more fat storage as well. So the gut microbiome, it's crazy when we think about it, but sometimes we actually can consider it an endocrine organ because we have these hormones that are starting even at that time. I think we've talked a lot about obesity and malnutrition, how we're eating lots of calories, but not necessarily nutrient dense foods. And this can definitely be a cause of micronutrient deficiencies. And some of those micronutrient deficiencies, so actual data shows that in obesity, we have sometimes up to 30%, 29% of people are deficient in B1, 11% of patients with obesity, depending on study we're looking at, B6 was deficient. There's B12 deficiencies, folate deficiencies, C deficiencies. Vitamin D is a huge one. You can see up to 90% of people. I mean, honestly, I would say most people in America are vitamin D deficient until proven otherwise. So if you do not know your vitamin D level, that is an easy thing to ask your primary care provider about. So, and then zinc, like I was mentioning, I feel like this is an underrated nutrient mineral that people are not checking in primary care. I'm starting to see more people getting their vitamin D level checked by primary care. So I feel like we're coming around that this is becoming more mainstream. But in other cases, we just released a podcast recently where one of our pharmacists told her story, and her story was that she lived in Southern California and she went and asked her physician to check her vitamin D level. And the physician said, no, you get enough vitamin D. You're in Southern California. That couldn't be the cause of your pain and your fatigue and your, everything that she had going on, depression. So he was like, you're depressed. Here's an antidepressant. So totally gaslit her. And then she goes and finds another provider, gets her vitamin D level checked. It was 8. An optimal vitamin D level is over 40, at least 50 to 70. Mainstream medicine would say 30, but hers was 8. So she was severely vitamin D deficient. As soon as she started a couple months into vitamin D, she did not have pain anymore. She could get out of bed. She was not having what they called fibromyalgia or depression. So like, if that's the one thing you learned from today, go check your vitamin D level, because it plays such a role in not only the immune system. We saw in COVID, people with severe vitamin D deficiency, or even just diagnostic vitamin D deficiency, less than 30, had more severe risk of being hospitalized for COVID. But we're starting to see with the autoimmune data, the weight loss data, the diabetes, insulin resistance data, that this nutrient is really important too. And it almost is considered almost like a hormone instead of a nutrient in a way, because our body synthesizes or makes it from the sunlight. But most of us aren't outside. I mean, I'm in Ohio. Today was the first day I've seen the sun in probably 2 weeks. And I'm not out in it, right? Like I'm inside because it's 30 degrees outside. So Lindsey probably gets more sun in the South, but it's probably not where we're spending most of our time throughout the day. And so most people are probably going to need supplementation if they don't spend a good chunk of time in the day outside.
Well, yes, I mean, we see people even that live in very, very sunlit environments still with vitamin D deficiency. Mm-hmm. And like, I will say too, what is the problem with simply taking a multiple vitamin every day? Right. Yeah. And so, Vita GBX is an option from Amare, but like this is a major problem. And mm-hmm. And it's a chicken and an egg thing, which came first, the obesity or the micronutrient deficiencies. But I can tell you, if you don't have zinc, you are not going to have a healthy thyroid. If you don't have selenium, mm-hmm. you're not going to have a healthy immune system, and you're also not going to have a healthy thyroid. Vitamin C, critical for the cardiovascular system. Vitamin D is just critical for everything. Like it really is broad ranging what vitamin D can do. B12, you're talking energy, you're talking that get up and go. B6, you're talking the most common cofactor in all the enzymatic reactions in your entire body. So simply taking a multiple vitamin can be an easy intervention that helps to offset all of this. And if a micronutrient deficiency is what is at the root cause of the obesity, remember, so stains, we talked about the I, the N is nutrient deficiencies and nutrient excesses. And so nutrient deficiencies can be a root cause of disease, as can nutrient excesses. And I also, Melody, you mentioned that tons of people are walking around visibly overweight and obese. I think it also is worth mentioning that there are also a ton of people out there that are what are considered skinny fat. So they appear to be very thin, and yet they have so much visceral fat, the fat in the wrong places. So simply because someone doesn't appear to be visibly overweight or visibly obese does not mean that we don't need to assess these micronutrient deficiencies, the insulin and et cetera, because you may have an underlying cardiometabolic problem that isn't visible from the outside.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's all kinds of people. I mean, we have people that aren't overweight that have PCOS. I mean, some of that can be genetic family history related too, but we also have, fatty liver happening in people that aren't technically overweight by their BMI because of choline deficiency, high fructose corn syrup, other things going on in our environment, toxins. So much to, unpack with the metabolic system for sure. So I think we covered stress a lot as well. We talked about how it increases belly fat. We talked about the blood sugar. Your body thinks you need sugar because it thinks you're running from a bear, but you're not really running from a bear. You're sitting at your desk stressed about whatever you have to do that day. And so you certainly don't need your blood glucose to elevate to handle those things. And then it also increases cravings for comfort foods. So that's because it also increases our serotonin and dopamine release as well. So, so managing cortisol is really important. Do you want to talk? I know you mentioned a little bit about Happy Juice, but do you want to talk about just like components of that and how they address cortisol?
Sure. So in Happy Juice, there are 3 supplements. It's 3 in 1, and you mix them all together to make Happy Juice. So Happy Juice contains Mentabiotics, Edge, and Energy Plus. So Mentabiotics is a really cool supplement, and it's really unlike what you get typically at the grocery store, because I know plenty of people listening are like, I got prebiotics, I got probiotics. Mentabiotics has 3 strain-specific bacteria. And strain specificity is where you have your genus, your species. So, for example, if you got a Lactobacillus acidophilus, that's a genus and a species. But what Mentabiotics does is it has a string of letters and numbers after the name of the bacteria. So you have these strings of numbers allow us to designate exactly what the bacteria is doing for us. So Lactobacillus rhamnosus, R11, helps with our stress response, and it helps to lower cortisol. It also helps to improve and modulate GABA. GABA is your primary relaxatory neurotransmitter in the body. Then you also have Bifidobacterium longum 175 that helps with our calmness, and it helps to tap down feelings of anxiousness, and it also helps to improve our cognitive function. Then Lactobacillus helveticus R52 is what is going to help with our systemic inflammation as well as our serotonin modulation. So Mentabiotics also has some prebiotics in there that are matched with the probiotics, as well as some really powerful antioxidants like Asian apple fruit and grapeseed extract, etc. You also have in Happy Juice Edge, and Edge comes in 2 flavors. You can grab a watermelon or the grape. And watermelon Edge, grape Edge, they're both very similar. This is what is considered to be a nootropic. So it changes the way our brain talks to itself. This product is going to help with weight loss because it is there for motivation. Need motivation to get out of bed, go to the gym, whatever. Edge is your friend to help with that. So Edge is a very simple product. It's got palm fruit that helps with our nervous system. Lychee fruit is going to help with endurance as in the gym, as well as mental endurance. It helps with fatigue. Mango leaf is what is going to make things happen really fast with great clarity. This is there for mental energy. And then we also, over time, can help to not only work specifically on belly fat, the most dangerous type of fat, but we also can reduce the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles. And so you're starting to look younger as you use, I know, right? Because that is one of the problems with weight loss, right? When you lose weight, part of it is you lose subcutaneous fat in the face, which can lead to what people perceive to be signs of aging. It's a normal thing. It happens to everybody, but nobody wants to look older because you've taken steps to live a healthier life. Energy Plus, exactly what it sounds like. It is mental energy, motivation, physical energy, without having super high levels of caffeine that can lead to that caffeine crash or the sugar crash. So that's what's in Happy Juice. Great to bundle it up with GBX Fit and Vita GBX. There is also GBX Burn, and that is what helps with thermogenesis. And that is what helps you to actually generate more heat, activate that healthy brown fat. And so that is kind of a really quick crash course into Happy Juice, Fit, Burn, etc.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I know I've seen you post a lot about that, educate a lot about that. And so many people are just really improving their health by, enjoying a little, I mean, it's like tastes good and,
Yeah,
it's not like it's laborsome to get down, each day. So
sure.
that's awesome. And as far as this is just that picture I was looking for earlier, the vicious cycle of stress, increased cortisol, obesity that just continues to play a role. And really like, obviously there's the supplement approach, but there's also the lifestyle approach. And what are we going to do to get into that deep breathing each day, to take a pause, whether it's we do box breathing and we breathe out for, as long as we can, and then breathe in and hold it as long as we can, and just really just reset our day so that we can do that at the traffic light. You can do that sitting at your desk. And so, those kinds of things can be really helpful to help stop, the fight or flight. And as far as, just other things, I mean, there's Tai Chi, there's yoga. Lindsay's a yoga instructor, so she could talk about some of her favorite yoga poses, but there's so many different things that whatever fits for you, just taking time. For me, sometimes it's sitting in my hot tub and just like not scrolling on my phone, just getting your mind off of things. Maybe it's prayer, like whatever it is that gets you into that rest and digest mode, instead of that fight and flight mode. Lindsay, are there any specific like yoga practices that really help you to get your stress under control?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is when people think about yoga, they tend to think about the poses, right? But the poses are just one part of yoga. And honestly, it's not even where yoga started. Yoga is pranayama. Yoga is intentional breathing. And so Melody mentioned box breathing. In yoga, it's called samavriti, where you simply try to get your inhalation to match your exhalation. So study of different pranayamas is great because there aren't just pranayamas that are there for relaxation. There are pranayamas that if you're overheated, if you're too cold, if you are needing to physically blow off stress, you can do that. Another thing that I will mention about breathing and weight loss actually is a byproduct of breath work. We think of it as, cardiovascular. Muscle is important because muscle helps us to deposit glucose and et cetera. But literally the way we burn fat is by blowing it out of our mouth. And so breathing is so, so important. So the breathing is one piece. And then as far as actual poses go, legs up the wall is a great one, to just scoot your hip in towards the wall and then flip your legs up. Child's pose is great. Corpse pose is great. The full pranam, where you're laying like fully on your belly and on your face, is also very, very good for relaxation. Any posture is better than no postures. Any breath work is better than no breath work. And I just listened to the 10% Happier podcast yesterday about breathing and about meditation. Anywhere is the right place to meditate. You don't have to be on a cushion. You don't have to be and it doesn't have to be 45 minutes. It can be 5 seconds while you're sitting in a traffic light. So don't miss opportunities to intentionally calm yourself down, for sure.
Yeah. I would say I spend most of my time when I'm praying, it's like I'm in the car, like going somewhere, and like I purposely turn off the radio, and I purposely, it's probably to pick up the kids or whatever it is. But I think a lot of people, that's the time where their mind races and they're, stressed out about the next thing that's coming. And so really trying to ground yourself, as you're even just doing things throughout your day can be really important. So we hope that throughout this presentation, we've given you some practical strategies for balancing cortisol. I mean, there's lots of other herbs and things that can be used. Ashwagandha is in, some products, things that are helping to modulate or balance that cortisol response. There's things like rhodiola. There's, other herbs that are, studied for many years. Chinese medicine has included them a long time. So sometimes working with, like Lindsey mentioned, the lab testing, I think there was a question in the chat as well about like what labs and what blood work do we get done? So, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the programs we have coming up at Farm to Table, but as far as lab work goes, I mean, the basics that we do a lot of just like comprehensive labs through places like LabCorp or Quest or, your traditional, you can use your insurance at these places in our practice. So we'll do a traditional chemistry panel, which is a complete metabolic panel. It'll have your glucose on it, your liver enzymes, because if you start to get fatty liver or some of these other things, we start to see those rise. Even the dysbiosis can cause those to rise at some levels depending on the patient. But we also will do the salivary cortisol that Lindsey was talking about. Again, that one point in time cortisol does not tell us much in the morning. So we actually tend to do a 5-point cortisol where we give you 5 tubes and then we'd have you do it 30 minutes after you wake up to make sure that your cortisol is rising, because really the highest point in the day should be that 30 minutes post wake up. So you do a wake up 30 minutes later, one at noon, one around 3 to 4, and then one at midnight. And so then we, review those levels, make sure they're not staying super high at night, was why you're not sleeping and you're having trouble calming down and why you're super stressed and anxious. Or if they're really low, the question is, there's technically not something like there's this wrong term out there called adrenal fatigue that people use. And it's really not that you're not producing cortisol, but you're not just like responding like you should with your cortisol. So if it's on the low end, there might be different ways to approach it. We don't necessarily want to use things that are going to reduce it if you're already too low. So that's where working with a practitioner sometimes can really help you determine your path. So you're not just guessing on the things that you want to do. But other labs, like blood work wise, I mean, the reason I love functional medicine is because it's so individualized. And so I'm not doing the same thing for every person. But a lot of these nutrients, like I said, can be measured at your standard lab. So I measure selenium all the time, zinc all the time. I measure copper to make sure the copper and zinc are in balance. I measure your A1C, your fasting insulin, like Lindsey mentioned. And really, getting to, inflammation markers. There's something called HSCRP, which is your sensitive inflammatory marker. It's not super specific. Like there could be a lot of things that cause your inflammation marker to be high, but there's something called a sedimentation rate. So there's lots of different things that we can measure. I mean, you can go and ask your provider for some of these things, but I've found a lot of times that they say, no, I'm not doing that. I don't have a reason to do that. But generally our patients are, getting these covered, when we code them appropriately based on their symptoms. So that's a little bit about the labs, but hormone wise, I think someone specifically asked about the Dutch test. I love the Dutch test. Do I think every person needs a Dutch test to start off with? No, because if your hormones are in the tank, the Dutch test is not going to help me very much, because really what I love about the Dutch test is I can see estrogen metabolites, but if you have no estrogen, I don't see any of your metabolites because there's not enough there. So to really look at, are they going in the right direction? So the estrogen metabolites, that piece we don't get to see if we don't have high levels. So I like to start with blood work first. And really blood work is probably where most of our hormone data is in serum levels. And so I will have patients go to the lab if they're still menstruating, we'll go to the lab if they're having a 28-day cycle around day 19 to 21 to measure their progesterone and their estradiol and that peak sort of luteal phase time frame, and get an idea of like, are they there? The hard part with lab testing is that if you have a delayed ovulation or you ovulated early or something like that, and we send you on one specific day, we might not necessarily capture the day we were looking for. So that's one thing that's a little bit challenging with blood work, and where Dutch does have what's called a cycle mapping test, where we can give you tests for multiple different parts of the month and then sort of see when you did ovulate based on your hormones. So it depends on what your goals are. If you're, trying to get pregnant or, mapping out your cycle, Dutch would probably be more of a go-to upfront. So those are some labs. Someone asked, if you don't have a provider, can I see you? So if you are in Ohio, yes, you can. If you are not in Ohio, then check out our website. And also, so you can go to farmtotable.life, and I'll put it in here, and you can click on find a book a 15-minute, you click on your state first, and then you can find the providers that are licensed in your state. So we are clinical pharmacists, which we should be able to practice outside and different places, but that's just not how the world runs right now. But you can look in your state, find a provider. If there's not someone in your state, let us know and we can help you, find a provider somewhere else. But definitely, if you book a 15-minute consult, please put that you found it on this webinar and with Lindsey that you found us so that we can track that and everything. But we appreciate, anybody checking that out and sometimes just meeting, whoops, I put too many slashes in there, I think. Meeting with I should listen to my husband and do the short codes so that I don't have to type this out every time. That would save me a lot of trouble. But there we go. And yeah, so sometimes having a guide is really helpful because if you're trying to do it on your own and you end up spending more money on all these things, trying like lots of different things without that guided direction. So speaking of having a guide, we have a couple of things coming up that we would love to have you join us for. So the first one is called the Craving Solution, and we are doing a 4-week deep dive into how to manage cravings. So certainly a lot of the supplements that we talked about can help with those signaling and like that actual biochemistry of signaling and helping reduce cravings. But we also know that this is a big lifestyle mindset change. And one of the biggest things to emphasize really is that Nicole Grams, who is our lead health coach, is, teaching you to trust yourselves around food and not to have to feel like you have to tiptoe around and never be around tempting food. We already sort of alluded to some of this, and that we want you to enjoy food, and we don't want to feel like we can't enjoy life because of certain types of food. So, and we have a full 12-month program that I'm going to talk about too, but this is really just like a great preview into what coaching looks like in a group coaching session. And if you've never been part of coaching before, Nicole is phenomenal. Like you'll walk away and you're just like, how did she get me there? Like, it just makes my brain hurt sometimes when I'm like talking to her, because I'm like, you're so amazing. She has such a gift. And so if you're interested in joining that, I have a link up on the screen right now. You can click sign up now. So that is a 4-week program. They're going to cover handling cravings when they hit, addressing shame surrounding food, feeling in control when you're around food, also sticking to your plan and not being in that all or nothing thinking process. Those allowing thoughts, when they come up and addressing those thoughts, and then also that emotional eating, how to address gatherings, all of that kind of stuff. So you really don't want to miss, being with Nicole during these next 4 weeks. So this is going to start next Wednesday night. So if you want more information, click the sign up now button. The page will talk a little bit about that. But if you can always fill out our contact form too, if you have further questions about this as well. And then I alluded to the last thing here is that we do have this program we're calling Thrive. So I love the word Thrive because I think and I put it on my license plate. So if you see an Ohio car with a Thrive on the license plate, that's me. But I want people to not be in this, everyone says, oh, I'm surviving. And sometimes there are days where we have to feel like that, right? I was up all night with my son who's puking. Today I feel like that. I don't feel like I'm thriving today, but in the grand scheme of things, I want most days to be where I feel like, yes, I am, in community. I am having good health. I am, doing something I love and I feel good. And so that's really what we want people to do. And so we want you to do that in a sustainable way. And I know this is challenging, especially for women right now. You're taking care of kids, you're trying to work, you're trying to do all of the things. And so getting together with a group of people to really help have accountability throughout the year and focus on those lifestyle changes is really important. So this is going to include 26 coaching calls over the course of 12 months. It also will include baseline and follow-up lab panels from LabCorp type facilities. And it also includes a workbook, and we're going to send you a scale really to just track your progress. And, in the coaching, we'll talk about, that's not their biggest focus, but we want to make sure, we do see some results as well. And this is going to be weekly for the first 4 months. You're going to have weekly meetings, and then twice a monthly for 2 months. And then after that, it'll be monthly meetings for the rest of the program. And so this will be virtual. This is with one of our health coaches. So it's not state specific like it is for working directly with our providers. So if you're really like, yes, I need to get to a place where I feel like I'm thriving, then definitely check out this page. And Nicole also has on the page, if you click the link here, there is a link to actually book a free call with her to talk about the program and ask questions. So I think that's really your next step, because this one does cost a little bit more. It is a whole year long. And so we want to make sure people understand exactly what the program entails. And Nicole can answer all your questions. So that link to book a call with her is there. And if you want to book a call with her to ask her about the craving solution, go ahead and do that too. She's, again, phenomenal. And I think you'll really enjoy getting to know her. So Lindsey, anything else that you want to add about weight loss or just stress or anything?
We can
take some questions. Yeah.
I simply want to encourage everyone that's on the call. Your worth is not determined by your weight. So
yes,
you must love yourself enough to show up and do the work. So just reminder, you can't heal a body that you hate. And so love yourself enough, show up, and don't think that your self-worth is solely defined by the number on the scale or the way you look in the mirror.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And the only reason that we are really talking about it from that like weight perspective is because we know there's connections to health benefits. But we, if we could just talk about do these things to feel better, it's like a little less objective and all of that. But yes, absolutely. We want you to really be the best version of yourself that you can be and really be in that thriving, mindset. And so if anyone wants, we'll stay on for a couple of minutes. If anyone has any questions in the chat that they want to drop in, I appreciate people being engaged. And someone says coding these is where I run into trouble. Would love a webinar on that. Okay. Well, Stephanie, reach out and send me a message either on wherever you follow us or send a message contact form. We can give you some tips, but honestly, a lot of coding comes back to just symptoms. So if someone has fatigue, has constipation, has diarrhea, has the vitamin deficiencies, a lot of times, whatever symptom that you're thinking is related to the vitamin deficiency is sort of where I go with that. And as pharmacists, we're not diagnosing. So we have to use a lot of symptom codes compared to a physician or a PA or NP that might use more like they diagnosed you with a specific condition type codes.
And I don't want to go too far down the coding rabbit hole, but just, shout out to the medication therapy management coding, which are specifically for pharmacists. So keep those keep those in mind as well.
Yeah, if you're a pharmacist on here, definitely you can check out that. And it depends on state, depends on insurance company, depends on a lot of things, like if those are the codes to use. Because like in Ohio, we have provider status, and for certain insurance plans can bill similar codes that physicians bill for the actual visits too. So, and Liz wants to know, what is the STAIN word again? So Lindsey, you want to go over that, the STAINs, what that stands for?
Yeah, since we're kind of getting short on time, I'm actually going to put an Instagram post into the chat. But STAINs stands for stress, toxins and intoxicants, allergens, antigens, and food allergies are in there, infections, infestations, dysbiosis, nutrient deficiencies, and nutrient excesses. And then the 3 S's at the end of STAINs are sedentaryism, sociogenomic, and sleep disorders.
Yes. Awesome. So check out her Instagram post that she just linked. And if you don't follow Lindsey, definitely follow her. And then I am at farmtotable.life on Instagram as well. So would love for you guys. I am not as good about posting as Lindsey, but I am trying to get better. That's trying to be there more often. And one question about figuring out insulin resistance. So fasting insulin levels is what we're talking about. So you can actually measure a fasting insulin level. You can also measure an insulin level, what we call postprandial or after a meal, like that 2-hour postprandial point. So they tell you little different things. So if your insulin levels are really high after a meal, it might, you're still concerned about that, as well as concerned about the fasting insulin. But the fasting insulin is often what we look at for this like creeping up insulin resistance, because like Lindsey mentioned, that we're going to see fasting insulin rise before we see glucose rise. And we normally actually see postprandial glucose rise, which that means that after meal glucose rise, even before we see fasting glucose rise in patients that are insulin resistant. So definitely, asking for a fasting insulin test would be important. So you want to fast for about 10 to 12 hours before you go into that test to get your blood drawn. You can drink water and make sure you stay hydrated. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Lindsey, for your time today. I really appreciate that. And if you guys have any further questions, you know where to find us on social media and our websites. Lindsey, you want to recap real quick where they can find you, including your podcast?
Yeah. So you can head to lindseyelmore.com. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, hit up the Lindsey Elmore Show. You can listen to me and Melody talk on the Lindsey Elmore Show, and then Lindsey Elmore at Lindsey Elmore on Facebook and Instagram, and at Dr. Lindsey Elmore on TikTok and Pinterest.
Awesome. And you can find me also on Instagram at farmtotable.life. You can also find our team page, which is at Farm to Table Team, on Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest and all those places. But check out our podcast as well. If you're on our website, farmtotable.life/podcast. We have Lindsey on our podcast as well. So there's more great information. We talked about gut-brain axis, I think the last time that you came on. We probably need to do more podcast episodes. I actually might put this on the podcast. So if you're listening to the podcast and you're hearing us, reference the podcast. So anyways, well, thank you again so much for being here, and hope everyone listening found some useful information. Next time, we'll see you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.